We still have very big achievement gaps, just like we do in this country, and that's something that I worry about every single day. You know, we've had 40 years of an economy that really hasn't worked very well for 90% of the American people. Almost all the growth over that 40 years has gone to the wealthiest people in the country. It used to be that one of the ways to solve for that problem was by having an education system that lifted people up. And unfortunately today, our education system nationally, we can talk more about why this is reinforcing the income inequality we have rather than liberating people from the economic circumstances they're born into. So now we're in a situation where the best predictor of a kid's education, just like the best predictor of a kid's income, is their parents' income. That's not the way this whole country is supposed to work. I think it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump was elected the last time. By the way, I view him very much as a symptom of our problems, much more than the cause of our problems. He has certainly made matters much worse in Washington, D.C., and certainly with respect to other countries around the world. But we need to get after this issue about how it is that we create economic growth in America, again, that benefits everybody in the country. And how do we have an education system, again, that's at the wind at our back, rather than something that's making it harder for us to achieve what we want to achieve for the next generation. How do we deal with climate and all the other issues that universal health care, and at the same time, how do we preserve our institutions so that our kids will be able to use them to make the decisions they have to make for the generations that come after us. And I'm really worried about what's going on back in D.C. You know, part of what happened with President Trump's election was people looked at the fact that we seem to be focused on everybody's priorities except their priorities. And there's a lot of truth to that. And what they said was, some people said was, well, we can't do any work, so let's send a reality TV star in there to blow the place up. And when I meet people at home who voted for him, and that's what they tell me is we want to blow the place up, I say, well, congratulations, you achieved your objective. What are we going to do now to make sure that we're not the first generation to leave less opportunity to our kids and to our grandkids? What are we going to do to restore America's role in the world? I do not think we can give into this politics of division that Donald Trump represents. I think as a country, we cannot go down that road. We know what will happen if we give in to our worst impulses rather than our best traditions. This is a choice that democratic societies often face when they're in economic strains like the ones that we're in today. And we've seen what happens when you elect a guy like Donald Trump. You end up with kids in cages on the border of the United States. When you elect a guy like Donald Trump, you elect a guy who seems to have concerns about himself, but doesn't seem to give a damn about my kids or your kids or anybody else's kids. And we should have that in the President of the United States. I hate to say it that way, but I think it's true. And I don't think we can give into the idea that what we need to do is just be Trump and then we can divide the country up again. We have to find a way to unify the country by pursuing a set of policies on climate, on healthcare, on the economy that actually bring people together, and I think that's possible. I represent a state that's a third Democratic, a third Republican, and a third independent exactly. You know, it's a complicated place to represent as a result of that. But I don't think these people are mortal enemies the way that our Washington politics seems to think that they are. And I believe that just as a purely practical political matter, Donald Trump's base is going to be galvanized going into this election. And it won't be enough just to galvanize the Democratic base. We're going to have to get some of those folks, whether it was 7 million or 9 million that voted for President Obama twice and then voted for Donald Trump, we're going to have to get some of those voters back in order to beat him. And that has been my approach ever since I got in the race. I finally got into this race. I got in later than a lot of other people. I had some cancer issues that I had to deal with, which are totally fine now. But the thing that really made me want to run was that I was just fed up on the 35th day of that ridiculous government shutdown when, for no benefit at all for the American people, it was just Washington politicians fighting with each other over stuff that isn't even the stuff we really should be focused on. I thought, I've got a role that I want to play here, and I'm gonna, and I'm, as a result, I'm going to run. And it has been a great privilege to spend time in your state and the other early states. And what I found is that people mostly want the same thing, which is universal health care. They want us to deal with climate. They want an economy that will actually work for everybody. And they'd like to know that our education system's working better for our kids, especially for kids that come from poverty, and that's what I would like to see too. So I'm grateful for your time this afternoon. I don't want to take any more of it with mine going on and on. Who would like to get us started? Question? Yes, sir.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm Victor Dutrick. I'm the chair of the West Des Moines
Mr.
Democrats.
Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being in West Des Moines.
Thank you very much. Where else would I be?
I have a question. You know, in the first debate, you said that nothing is going to get better in Washington as long as Mitch McConnell is the majority leader. I'm paraphrasing kind of what your answer was. And I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
So what is the plan? If you become president and he still is majority leader of the Senate, we still have the same problems.
Right, so first of all, it's important that we make an effort to have him not be the majority. And, you know, that means that we have to win Senate seats in places like Iowa and Colorado and Arizona and North Carolina, which means we have to be strategic about what we're running on, and we have to be strategic about who our presidential candidate is, because it needs to be somebody who can go to those states and campaign. And if we don't do that, we won't win the majority this time, and we're going to be stuck with an ideology that's reflected by McConnell and reflected by the Freedom Caucus, people like Steve King and others, that about 10 years ago, when I went back during the rise of the Tea Party and immobilized the federal government, immobilized our exercise in self-government. Their view of the world is that they were sent there to destroy, basically, our exercise in self-government. And I believe their ideology is way outside the traditions of the conventional American Republican Party. It's something else. It relies heavily on Sarah Palin's cartoon version of what the Founding Fathers were engaged in when they were founding this country. And it's my belief, after watching these guys in action for 10 years, that they will not compromise on anything, that they will not agree on anything, whether it's climate or immigration or healthcare. And so what that means is we have to beat them or find a way to close over them, which means that if he is still the majority leader, we have to have a president go out the country and say, this is my proposal for reversing the Trump tax bill, you know, and to go to places where we didn't win, but, you know, counties like I have in Colorado where I'll never win more than 30% of the vote no matter what I do, and invite the Fox News host to come with you. I'm not sure they will, but you could invite him to come anyway, and be able to show the people the math. Farmers and ranchers are smart, they can see it, of what Trump's tax proposal did for them versus what our proposal would do. What our proposal on trade would do versus what Trump's tariffs did. We're going to have to go out there and do that hard work, I think. I don't think there's a shortcut. And I also believe this is a matter not just for the next election, but for my lifetime. You know, when you see what McConnell has done on the judges, for instance, just to take that as one example, that's been the work of decades that's led up to this point where Donald Trump, very unfortunately, is putting on more judges than any president in American history. I would never want us to be as malevolent or cynical as McConnell is, because I don't know how anybody could live in a democracy, you know, hating it that much. But we have to be as strategic as he is, and I don't think we often have been. I think, you know, we should talk about climate in a few minutes, but just to append this thought, it is preposterous that we have a climate denier in the White House. In other words, I mean, it's morally preposterous that we have a climate denier in the White House, but that's not the point. I mean, politically it's preposterous. Why do I say that? Because the majority of Americans believe climate change is real and we need to do something about it, and that we need to act with urgency. Yet we lost an economic argument to Donald Trump on climate. We should never have lost that argument. We didn't have to lose it, but we did, and we can't lose it in going into this election. That's just one example. Well, that's two examples. That's judges and climate. So that's what I think we need to do. I think this is not a party that can just be about the two coasts. Our party has to represent the geographic middle of our country, the Rocky Mountain region where I'm from, and the Midwest where you're from. Yes.
I would like to defer my comments to my daughter.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Alice Steele from West Des Moines, Iowa. I'm going into 8th grade, and I'm here with my family and Sarah and our friends, the Wards. This is my brother Bennet. I would like to bring to your attention another healthcare issue that both of our families deal with on a daily basis. At age 6, I was diagnosed with ectodermal dysplasia, and Bennet was diagnosed June 10th of this year at the age of 4. It's a rare disease that causes us not to develop sweat glands and teeth. The one thing that causes me and my family the largest issue is our teeth. I will only ever have 14 permanent teeth, 5 on the top and 9 on the bottom, and Bennett's missing 6, which is amazing. That means that I'm missing 18 of the normal 32 permanent teeth. Missing teeth has had a negative impact on my mental and physical health and has caused a large financial burden on my family due to medical insurance not covering the medically necessary treatments I need. Due to the lack of treatment, I've experienced over other health issues that could have been avoided that unnecessarily drive up healthcare costs. By improving my ability to initiate the digestion process in my mouth like everyone not affected experiences each time they put something in their mouth. Currently, I'm in my 2nd set of braces. Once my jaw is fully done growing around the age of 18 to 24, I'll begin the long process of complex oral treatments. I will require bone grafting to build up my jawbones and require many dental implants. The cost of this process will be tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket for my family. Our birth defect is currently not covered under medical insurance, and under the universal healthcare option increases the number of insurance claims regulated by the federal government, leaving us with no consumer protections or options as the medical claims are systematically denied or deemed as cosmetic or dental. Currently, we have S560 and HR 1379, the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. ELSA has gained strong bipartisan support since its February introduction by Senator Tammy Baldwin and Joni Ernst. Senator Chuck Grassley, the Senate Finance Chairman, is also agreed to co-sponsor. I see that you have previously worked with Senator Grassley on the ACE Kids Act.
Yeah.
Ectodermal dysplasia requires complex treatments and care across state lines, yet we still don't have medical insurance coverage for the treatment. This bill will close loopholes that allows medical insurance companies to deny or cause delays with appeals starting that oral and dental needs due to congenital anomalies, birth defects, or either cosmetic or since teeth deemed not covered benefits. We need your help in supporting S560 to ensure that we receive the care that's already in our policies. Not being able to chew food properly or speak is not cosmetic. My education is extremely important to me. Without the timely and prudent treatment, going to college will not be possible due to the health issues and financial burden on my family that my birth defect causes. Choosing to go to college to be a physical therapist or getting a job to help pay for my medical treatment is what my current future is, along with my family saving money to pay for my college treatment versus saving money for college. I do want to leave you with a thought and a question. When you have a smile that you can be confident about, you can change the world. You can change the world. And if I was your daughter, would you want medical coverage for my birth defect that negatively impacts your health?
Yes. Bennet, I'm betting that this is not how you spell your name.
Yes, 2 T's.
That's what I'm the only person in the world who spells their name with 1 T.
And I think something else I would like to share
Sure.
an analogy is, so say you have oral cancer, would an insurance company deny that because it's oral versus breast cancer, colon cancer,
Right.
or leukemia? No, that doesn't happen. So because you get all over cancer care, why is it that we don't get
Right.
whole body care for a birth defect?
And this is Chuck has on this bill?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll gladly co-sponsor the bill. I'm on the committee with them. I haven't looked at it yet, but if Tammy Baldwin and Joni Ernst and Chuck Grassley are on it, and with your advocacy, that's good enough for me, so
We
thank
currently
you.
have 24
Great.
co-sponsors on the bill in the Senate, and 163 in the House. And then Sarah and her daughter Amelia live in Ankeny, and they also have some girls.
Yes.
2 teeth, that's 2.
Yes.
So the teething ability is what, the same as a 6-month-old?
My brother's name is Lucas.
How many teeth does Lucas have?
2.
Two.
He has a hard time eating, he has a hard time speaking. Yes. And that's just the tip of what, oh, so.
No, thank you very much for coming, I appreciate it, and I think it's worth noting as well that we're the only people in the industrialized world who have to go through stuff like this because of our screwed up healthcare system and the fact that we don't cover people, and we don't have universal healthcare coverage in the country, and it's not like, you know, you heard the testimony here, it's not like, I mean, it's nothing anybody's done to themselves, it could happen to anybody, to anybody's kid, so I'm glad to do that, and Shannon will make sure that I do it, and we'll get your contact information so you can keep track of what we did. Thank you very much, and thank you, Alex. I saw you guys getting out of the car, and I heard Bennett's mom say, Bennet!
Senator, President Trump delivered, I think, a very interesting vehicle for the climate future with the victory that he got yesterday from the Supreme Court. And essentially, the Supreme Court said a president can declare an emergency on whatever the president thinks is an emergency.
Right.
And now the president has the power to divert the money immediately with his signature from $2.5 billion going into the wall. Along the campaign trail of events I've been to, the question has started to change to, what would President Bennet do on day one with his pen?
Yep.
If he has this power to declare the emergency and to devote the funds immediately without worrying about Mitch McConnell or the recalcitrant legislature. What's your
I'd
thought?
say a couple of things. One, I've clearly laid out in my climate plan, which is called the America's Climate Action Plan. I wanted it to look, anyway. And in there, I laid out in excruciating detail what my use of executive orders would be. I think it's clearer than actually any other candidates. And what I say is, here's what I would do on day one to convene the people that we need to convene. And over a 90-day period, here's what I would do to pass meaningful climate legislation. And if it doesn't, if the Congress doesn't pass it, then I would use on the 90th day the executive orders that are available to the president. So now I said that before all this other stuff. And so, and I believe there are actions that can be taken under existing federal statutes to do that. But I also want to say something else, which is that this is a good reason, I think, why we can't accept the political situation that we have back there right now. Climate's the best example. We have to act urgently on climate. The next generation is totally right about that. Unlike any other issue that we're confronting, if we don't act on climate, it may be too late by the time they get here. And there are lots of other issues that they should be mad at us about, like the college debt that they have to pay back because we don't support higher education anymore in this country, the quality of their K-12 schools because we don't fund schools or pay teachers the way we should, the fact that we're putting another $10 trillion of debt on the balance sheet because we're unwilling to make decisions. Those are all things that are failures of our generation, but they'll be able to fix it if we can't put our act in. Climate, they may not be able to. They probably won't, and that's why we have to act urgently. We also need to make sure that whatever decision we make can endure, because if we are permanently in a state of I'm going to put my stuff in for 2 years, then they're going to rip it out for 2 years, then I'm going to put it in for 2 years, then they're going to rip it out for 2 years, which I think is sort of where we are at the moment. We're not going to be able to answer the climate challenge that we need to answer because it is a generational issue. We're going to be working on this for the rest of my life and the rest of Caroline's life and the rest of, her daughter's lives, and we need a politics in this democracy that can sustain that. Which means that we have to do the hard work of building coalitions that will support it. So let's assume that I do go in there and put in all the stuff that anybody would put in. It doesn't do any good if it all gets ripped out by the next person, and which is what we've seen, have happened. So I think that I feel determined to, because I feel so strongly about this, I feel determined to broaden the coalition that will support climate change. And when I say we should have never had a climate deniers president, I mean it. I mean it in political terms and in moral terms. And I will do everything I can to make sure he doesn't win that economic argument. If you spend any time in Iowa, or any time in Colorado, or any time in Florida, or any time in California, or any time, you know, in places in between, it is preposterous to imagine that a plan that addresses climate by denying that it's real and putting your head in the sand is gonna be economically viable for this country. That will lead to the destruction of our economy. Whereas if we do the things we need to do to mitigate climate, if we do the things we need to do to prepare for these changes, and we do what has to happen in order to change our fuel mix so that we get to, you know, no additional carbon by 2050, I think that's gonna drive economic growth in this country. I believe it, and I'm not apologetic about it. I don't think you have to make a trade to get there. So that's what I would do. Thank you. What else?
So very high drug costs have been a huge factor in the reason why our healthcare costs have been so expensive.
I didn't hear the first part, sir.
So extremely high drug costs
Yeah.
have been a huge factor in the reason why our healthcare is extremely expensive in this country. Do you have a plan to take on these drug companies and their prices? And if you do, what is that plan?
I do. Well, my plan is called Medicare X, which in my view is the best bill name I've ever had. So hashtag Medicare X. It requires that the federal government, for the first time, negotiate drug prices for Medicare and for the public option, which I proposed, which is Medicare X. I think we should take these guys on by doing that. I think, you know, it is ridiculous that we pay the prices that we pay here for drugs, and everybody else in the world who gets the benefit of the R&D that we do here in the United States for research and development has to pay much less out of their pockets for drugs. I meet people all the time that are having to decide between whether to feed their families or pay for drugs, or feed themselves or pay for drugs. That's like the discussion we were having earlier with this family. That is unique to the United States of America, and it's a reflection of how lousy our policies is. Yes.
Would you keep Obamacare?
I would, what I would suggest we do is we build on Obamacare, we build on the Affordable Care Act. And I was there running for election for the first time in 2010, and they spent more outside money in my state than any state in America. The Koch brothers, this was right after Citizens United was decided, and I was hammered on health care. He cast the 60th vote, he cast the 60th vote. So I have a little bit of an attachment to it to begin with, but I have always believed that we should, and I believed then, and led the effort back then, to have a public option as part of it, to provide competition for private insurance, to be able to have all these people in America who are not poor enough to be on Medicaid, but they're not making enough money to earn, or to afford private insurance, or to afford it comfortably, to have a public option that can cover their families. It's got real insurance and would reduce costs by about, in my bill's case, 50% for some families, more for other families. Nobody would have to spend more than 14% on their income on health care, and most people would be spending a lot less than that on health care. We can do that. And I think that's the way we should do it. I think that if we're running on a proposal that takes insurance away from the choice to have private insurance away from 180 million people, as Bernie's plan does, we're going to lose this election. And that is a serious issue for me, because we will not win the Senate back if that's what we're running on. It's impossible. And we could lose the House, because there aren't, 180 million Americans who want to give up that choice. There may be some who'd like to trade in their private insurance for public insurance, but people are not going to want to give up the choice. And so I think we are a lot better off building on what we have. And I think it's both better policy and better politics. It doesn't sound as good on a Twitter feed, unfortunately. I regret that, but I think it's the right thing for us to do.
But the problem is that our noisiest people are the ones who are for policy that is not going to be Trump.
Well, we need to be a little noisier, and we need to, and we need to. I am a deep believer in common sense, notwithstanding the fact that our president is the president. and that people in the end generally make the right choice. Look, if I were sitting in my living room, that's the test I would, not my living room, but any living room in Colorado. And again, it's a third. And I said, look, let's talk about healthcare. And let's spend 20 minutes trying to figure out some stuff, objectives we could agree on. And pretty soon, I think we'd agree on 3. One is everybody should be covered. You know, you shouldn't have to go through the struggle that you're going through today. And the more people that are covered, the fewer people have to struggle this way because we all share the risk together. Second, we should reduce costs, which goes to the healthcare, the drug place in the back. We're paying twice as much as any other industrialized country is paying for worse healthcare results in America because of our political system. And families are having to make decisions that nobody else in the rest of the world has to make. And people would say, I agree with that. And then somebody would say, you know what, Michael, though, I'm also worried about the quality of our healthcare. Like, some of it seems to be pretty high, but other parts of it doesn't seem so high. And we should make sure we've got high quality healthcare. That, I think, would be basically the agreement. And then if I said, well, okay, and they said, okay, Michael, what's your plan? And I said, well, the first thing is we have to take away the health insurance that 60% of the people in this room have. They would say, do you have another plan? Because that's not going to fly. And it won't. And I say that not to be argumentative or anything. I say that because I want us to win the presidency. And I want us to win the Senate. And I want us to win the House. And more than any of that, I want us to have universal health care coverage in this country. I was delayed in getting into this race. Nobody needs to feel sorry for me because I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I had no symptoms at all. It was just a screening that I had because of an annual physical, and the doctor said, you know, it looks like you might have this, and it turned out that I did have it, and I had to have an operation as a result of it. I mean, like this family, if I didn't have health insurance or I didn't have a primary care doctor just because I lived in America, I'd be standing here talking to you sick and wouldn't have known it. That doesn't happen in other countries. And so for me, it's all about how do we keep our eye on the prize of delivering what America needs us to deliver, and how do we move away from the voices that are just sort of about churning more of the political vitriol that's not going to get us where we need to be. Twitter wars are not going to beat Donald Trump. I guarantee you that. Empty promises are not going to beat Donald Trump. He's the master of both those things. And I think what we need to be proposing and what we need to be for, as I said at the outset, is an agenda that unites America, not an agenda that divides Democrats. I was in Iowa 2 weeks ago meeting with some carpenters, and these guys were saying, why? We don't understand why there are people in the Democratic Party that wants to take away the health care plan that we have with our union. Trump's not coming after that plan, it's Democrats who are coming after that plan. And my point was, look, you got a president who's tried to he has taken insurance away from millions of Americans. He's still trying to take it away from people with pre-existing conditions. And you're right, we should go into this election on offense, not on defense. And I think building on the Affordable Care Act is the way to do it. Yes?
What's your position on term limits?
What is my position on term limits? I think there are other ways to reform our system that would be better than term limits. When I went back there, I was 99th, and I was the youngest senator. I was 44th in the Senate. 44 years old. And then a week later, Kirsten Gillibrand showed up, and my title was taken away from the youngest senator. And there's been so much turmoil and churn because of the rise of the Tea Party, because Democrats have lost, because Republicans have lost, that in 10 years, I'm now 41st in the Senate. It took John Kerry, I'm told, 18 years to move from being in the bottom to being in the top 50. And part of my diagnosis of what's wrong with the Senate is we have no middle management left anymore. We've got people that have been there for like 200 of the country's 230 years. And then we have, I'm sorry. And then we have people that are, junior people like me in 10 years, and it takes a while to figure out how the place works.
The parties that do live a long time.
Yeah.
It's true. And I got it. The other thing is, if we have term limits, The lobbyists don't have any term limits. And so they can stick around as long as they want, and they'll have all the historical knowledge and all the historical wisdom. What I would spend my time doing is overturning Citizens United so that the American people are actually determining what our political future is, not the Koch brothers. I would ban partisan gerrymandering or political gerrymandering in this country, which Congress can do. Congress can ban it. We don't need to do it on a state-by-state basis so that politicians weren't picking their constituents, but constituents were actually picking their politicians, which I think is also can be a danger in the term limits thing. And a couple other things I would do. One, to go back to the healthcare discussion we were having earlier, I would ban members of Congress from having federal health insurance until we have universal health care in this country. And I think you'd be amazed at how quickly we would discover that we could deliver it for the American people. I have not taken this subsidy since we passed the Affordable Care Act because I made a promise while it was going through that I wouldn't, because I didn't want people thinking that I was trying to benefit myself. And 10 years later, I still haven't taken it. I also think another change, better than term limits would be, this is a bill that I've had for years and years and years. It took me years to get one co-sponsor. Now all of a sudden, there's all this interest in it. Would say that if you've had the privilege of being a member of the Senate or a member of the House, that you should accept a lifetime ban on ever becoming a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. More than half of the people that leave Congress and don't retire become lobbyists. And those are people who probably would love term limits because they'd have a good excuse for leaving, and then they could go make 4 times as much being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., which I think is a corruption of our system.
Last question.
No, let's keep, we got a little while.
Question. Of the president, the moral aspect of it, and the political aspect of it.
Yeah.
It seems that's what's being argued out.
That is being argued out. I'm not sure that I fall I'm not sure I fall on the axis of the way the argument's going on line or on the cable right now, because I believe there's a moral and political imperative for Donald Trump to be a one-term president. That's what I believe, and in my mind, that eclipses everything. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't in the House. I'm not in the House, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to go down the road of exploring what he did and continuing to have hearings and beyond Mueller. And it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't have those facts lead us where they need to lead us one way or another. But we have to also be cognizant of the fact that when he's impeached, if he is, McConnell will acquit him in the Senate, and he will run arguing that he's been exonerated. That is a very costly thing for our democracy. So
He'll argue things though that anything's not showing back.
and I hear that argument. I accept that argument, certainly with respect to Donald Trump, who, let me just give you an example, who ran saying that, this is an example unrelated to impeachment, but happens to be related to my rant on the floor this week about Mitch McConnell. He ran saying, I am going to pay off our debt in 7 years. It's going to be really easy for us to do that. When you got the right people in office, you can do it with pennies and a couple cents, and it's like a joke. Sorry, no, I'm sorry. Gibberish. But that's what he ran on. After 10 years of the Republicans accusing Obama of being a Bolshevik and a socialist and not allowing him to spend any money and all the rest, he says, I'm going to pay it off in 7 years. But I'm going to give you a big, beautiful tax cut. I'm going to give you the biggest defense spending increase you've ever had. I'm not going to touch Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. I'm going to renegotiate our debt deals. He hasn't done that any more than he's done anything about the North Korea. And now, next year, we're going to have a $2 trillion deficit because of this guy. At a moment when we have falling unemployment. Do you know how hard that is? That's like a law of physics that says you can't have falling unemployment and a growing deficit. But that's happened because of his spending and because of the tax cuts for wealthy people. So I know he'll say one thing and do another. I just don't want to make it easier for him. That hasn't led me to conclude something today as I'm standing here on whether we should go forward. I think the House should continue to go forward, and I think the guys committed impeachable offenses. But what I would also say is, just like it's not acceptable to me on moral and political terms to not have a climate, to have a climate denier in the White House. It would not be acceptable for me to have a Pyrrhic victory on impeachment that helps get him reelected. That's not
Yeah, let's
acceptable.
spend our energy doing something else.
Yeah, that is where I think yes.
So China's
Oh, wait,
investing.
hold on. Do you mind if I get some people who haven't asked a question yet, then I'll come back? Yes.
Senator, I fundamentally think you're a decent man with a great reputation. The people who work with you seem to respect you and enjoy it, which is a very positive thing. I think your analysis of people agreeing, for the most part, no matter whose table you're sitting at, what jersey color they wear, we tend to agree on the vast majority of the middle. I have a concern that that is what's needed in the moment. Trump was elected in part because he activated previously dormant voters. We see the same thing with Brexit and Boris Johnson, activating these people who have never voted before through these extreme feelings and passions.
Yep.
How does that analysis resonate with you and your team? Because I think you're right, you do appeal to the masses, but is that enough?
I think your analysis is correct. I think that's why I believe this can't be a our base versus his base campaign, because his base will be activated in the way you describe. It involves a lot of people that didn't vote before, and our effort needs to be, this one point, our effort needs to be focused on the next generation to make sure we're getting young people out to vote, because that's how we can combat that and we can make a difference, because this guy's view of the world is so inconsistent with everybody else in the world. I think Trump's approach to foreign policy and to domestic policy is so widely outside the mainstream of conventional American political thought that if we can pursue an agenda that's in the mainstream of American political thought, and we can then galvanize our base as well as bring independents who voted for Donald Trump, I believe we can win. And I also think that in the end, people actually want to stand up for our democracy. I think people want to stand up for our democratic traditions. I think the idea that he perpetrated on the American people last time, that I alone can fix it, is not how this is all supposed to work. The way this is supposed to work is it's our job to fulfill our responsibilities to the next generation and the generation after that, just like people have done it before. How do you get that across in the cross currents of the social media environment we're in right now, and how you get that across in the crosstalk on the cable at night is a question I am wrestling with every single day, and I just want to be candid about that. Not just for my candidacy, but for the country. I'm worried about that. There are 12 or 13 million people in America who get great representation in Washington because they're in this perpetual daily ritual of partisan stuff that just churns and churns and churns on Twitter, but never has to sacrifice for anybody, never asks anybody to actually accomplish anything. And meanwhile, there's 320 million people in America that have no representation because they're not obsessed with politics. They're trying to raise their family or support their small business or do something useful in the community. And I think we need those people in order to deal with climate and in healthcare and all the rest. That's what we've got to figure out how to do. So that's partly what presidential campaigns are about, and I'm going to have to figure out how to elevate our message, and that'll hopefully start in Detroit this week. Thank you. Yes, and then I'll come back here. Yeah.
So I have a question about housing. So last year, the National Low Income Housing Coalition released a report that there's not any county in the United States that a family making minimum wage can afford a two-bedroom apartment. So what would you do as president to make sure that families can afford safe housing?
So, on the broad economic question, you're pointing to something that's really important, because on the one hand, we've been affected by the fact that wages haven't risen largely, but also costs of certain things that you have to have, that are not nice to have, but have gone like this. While, I mean, the costs of other things have gone like this. Like, you can buy a bicycle today for less than it cost, not even in inflation-adjusted dollars, when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we had a black and white TV. Today, for less money, you can buy a color TV. You don't even have to get up. I still am amazed by it. You don't have to get up and walk across the room And as my Polish grandmother would say, open as you can do it from sitting, and it's flat screen and all that, but it's cheap, you know, but that doesn't make you feel secure. And when you can't afford, as I said earlier, housing, early childhood, higher ed, or healthcare, you got a real problem. And housing is a really serious issue that has become even more serious over the last 10 years. I think that we need to dramatically increase the housing vouchers that we have in this country. Half the people that are eligible for those vouchers cannot get them because we have capped their availability. We live in a world where we're willing to give everybody who can get it a mortgage deduction for their home, no matter, you know, how well they're doing. We haven't done the same thing for people who are struggling, even though they're working, to be able to get a housing voucher. So that's one thing I would do. I have a bill that's actually the first bill I'm aware of that anybody in Congress has ever put together on the evictions crisis in this country, because I don't know if you've read Matthew Desmond's book, have you? It's an excellent book, and I called him up after it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I said, will you come by? He came by the office, and we've been working with him for the last 2 years on housing policies, including one to study evictions in the country, because evictions are such a destructive remedy for families and for our economy, because the dislocation that happens as a result. So what we're trying to do is pull the data together to look at it and see what we could do going from there. We have to build more housing in this country. Now that is mostly a local decision. I work at the local level of government, and I know we're going to have to decide in some places that we're going to have more density of housing if we're going to have more affordable housing. And the federal government can incentivize that stuff by layering in infrastructure dollars when people are either building more dense housing or more transit development housing, or housing that is, you know, better for the environment that we've historically had. And those are some ways that I would approach it. It's a great, it doesn't come up all the time, and I'm glad you raised it because it's a really important problem. Sir? Yes, sir.
How'd you get along with the teachers union?
How did I what?
How'd you get along with the teachers union?
We had an excellent and difficult relationship. It was different. It was varied. You know, we on the one hand, there were decisions that I made that some people in the union didn't like. Like, for example, I believe very strongly we have to change the way we pay teachers, because the whole architecture of how we pay teachers belongs to a time when we had a labor market that discriminated against women and said, you have two choices, one's being a teacher and one's being a nurse. And basically we were subsidizing our public education system with that discrimination. And there are ways in which the current steps and lanes stuff has made it hard for us to move past that. That's still something that I believe, but not everybody that I've worked with in the teachers union believes that, and I just want to be honest with that. On the other hand, because of the work that I did and others have done, Denver went from being a district that was losing enrollment every year, and we were the 6th lowest paying salary in the metro area in Denver. By the time I left, even that was quite a while ago. By the time I left, we were the #1 paying district in this state, and we hired more teachers over the last 15 years per capita than I would guess any other school district in America, because we were the fastest growing urban school district over the last 15 years or so. So I think I've got a very good relationship with the people that I work with back there. I think they believed that I was honest, even if we didn't always agree with each other. And I think that ought to be enough, not myself, because I don't expect to agree with everybody about everything. And I have good relationships with the national union folks, and spent just some time this week with the heads of the NEA. And good relationship with Randy Weinberg. I think she vouched for me, who's the head of the AFT. We have a difficult challenge in our, we have to be honest about it. You know, so much of the system belongs to a design that's from the 19th century. We have to find a way to bring it into the 21st century. And I think that's a job for management and labor to do, working together. That's my view. Okay, Yang guys, back here.
So China's investing billions of dollars in transportation and communications technology like high-speed rail, and they're seeing the returns in local economic development. Do you see this as an issue that we should be focused on, and what would be your plan
They're seeing
to
what returns, what you say?
local economic developments along developments in high-speed rail and infrastructure? Do you see this as something that we need to take on head-on here in America? And if you do, what is your plan?
Yeah, well, let me just say this. First of all, they're not just doing it in China, they're doing it all
Yeah.
over the world. I mean, if you go to Africa, China's everywhere, America's nowhere. While we spent 7 months, we're still talking about it, we talked about it today, 10 months, 12 months, obsessed over Donald Trump's $6 billion for his medieval wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for. I want to remind you, by the way, I was part of the Gang of Eight in 2013 that wrote the immigration bill for Democrats. It had a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people here that were undocumented. It solved the agricultural issues so much so that it's the first immigration bill endorsed by both the Farm Workers Union and by the growers in this country. It had the most progressive dreamers bill that had ever been conceived, much less passed, with 68 votes. And something Donald Trump does not remember, it had $46 billion of border security in it. But it was 21st century security. It was stuff that would allow us to see every single inch of the border, you know, and we doubled the number of border security agents. And we had 350 miles of border fence, which the president now calls steel slats, but it's the same thing. And we had internal security. I mention all this just because there is such a cost to the time we're wasting with this guy. Such an unbelievable cost. And it is profound on immigration. On infrastructure, think about this. Oh, so sorry. So while we were wasting all our time horsing around with that, and that was what we were obsessed with on the cable at night, and that's what all the Twitters were about, and all that other stuff in the tweets, China is building a 3,500-mile fiber optic cable from Latin America to Africa to connect it with China to allow them to continue to export their surveillance state around the world and use big data to propagate their philosophy. That's what's going on while we're horsing around with this. And they are not inconvenienced by democracy.
Yeah.
We are really inconvenienced by having a president who doesn't believe in democracy, and we are really inconvenienced by having a freedom caucus who doesn't allow us to exercise democracy, but we better get our act together.
Yeah.
Or these guys are going to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow, which they're going to do anyway. But I think humanity needs an example of a self-governing enterprise that believes in freedom and believes in privacy and believes in the rule of law and believes in freedom of the press and believes in independent judiciary. I believe we need that as humans. And that's us. That's nobody in Europe. That's us. We have to be the leaders of that. And infrastructure, listen to this. Since 2001, we have cut taxes in this country by $5 trillion. Almost all the benefit of that has gone to the wealthiest people in America. And by the way, none of it was paid for. So that $5 trillion was all borrowed from the Chinese to stick Caroline and her generation with the bill. On top of that, we spent $5.6 trillion in the Middle East. So that's about 11 or 12 trillion. Trump says it's actually 7 in the Middle East, so let's give him the benefit of that. 13 or 14 trillion dollars. We could have used that money to fix every road and bridge in America. We could have used that money to put fiber optic cable into every rural place, fiber broadband in every rural place in America. We could have fixed every single airport infrastructure project that's backlogged in our country. We could have made Social Security solvent for Caroline's generation, not just my generation. We could have paid every teacher in America 50% more in salary and given every kid in America preschool, and we could have paid down our debt and our deficit. And we could have had a real infrastructure bill that supported the kind of rail projects that you're talking about and the transit-oriented development that you're talking about. We did none of that. None of it. None of it. And from the point of view of the next generation of Americans, or for Americans who are concerned that their kids can't get out of poverty, or no matter how hard they work, they can't afford the stuff we were talking about earlier, we might as well lit all that money on fire. So here's what I propose to do. Stop frickin' doing that. And let's start.
coronavirus is gonna die soon, but
I wasn't too satisfied with that last answer, but you know.
I mean,
You could have answered it in like one paragraph.
I know it's a lot of like feel good politics
I don't need
talk.
that shit right now.
You know, a lot of that, but I mean, not as bad as I thought, but it is what it is. I have to end because my phone's gonna die, guys. But thank you guys so much, okay? I'll record the rest of it on YouTube. Thank you guys. Love you, Twitch.
This is major.